Take the frame is like AVG. It's like it's only once the word is there that the judges see it to give out the awards.
Nobody's.
Frames like it says on the thing, it says on the guidelines of the contest that you cannot exceed 3 inches.
I feel like a couple times. I feel like
It's so much. Even if it was like
so we got this in the Arts Empowerment Project.
that's what
Do you want to sit and do some art?
Okay. Hey, real quick, anybody, can you jump on YouTube or Facebook and see if you can see the stream? Because it's not showing up.
And you want some help?
Just real quick.
I know, it's because it's you have to ask your sister, this is hers, so she has to be willing to share with you. She said no.
See if the live stream is working.
Why did you sit on the floor?
Good afternoon. Welcome you all to our Artist Talk. My name is Claude Whitfield. I'm the founder of the Music Academy Backspins inside of WAPA, and I hope you guys are doing well today. We have had some amazing talks already. And you guys have heard already, they've already gotten started. So I'm excited about this Artist Talk and to dig in. How the flow will go is we have about 5 or 6 questions that each artist will be allowed to answer and share. And then from there, we'll be able to get questions from the audience. What we'll do first is jump right in, allow each one of these fine artists to introduce themselves, and we'll get right to it.
My name is Osiris Rain. I'm a VAPA-based artist, and I am a muralist working. I am a muralist working in the Arts Empowerment Project. I am a muralist working all over the US and internationally when I get the chance.
My name is Chadwick, Chad Cartwright. I am a visual artist and photographer. Also, my studio is based here in Vapa, and I love to art every day.
Hello, my name is Doris Kapner. I'm also a visual artist. I have a studio across the street from the call center. I'm one of the visual artists on the floor, and I feel called to be a partner to that one.
Awesome. So our first question is, what is your primary medium and favorite color?
Well, primary medium is spray paint. Favorite color, that's a tough one because they're all awesome. I got blue and pink. Blue and pink are my favorite complementary.
Yeah, primary medium would be acrylic paint and digital photography. And favorite color combination also would be red and green.
My primary medium is actually ceramic sculpture, though I'm also been doing a lot of printmaking lately, which is a nice complement to it. And my favorite color is actually Osiris's shirt.
Nice.
Thanks for the plug.
Okay, how do you get out of or avoid writer's block when you have a standstill or hit a brick wall? How do you guys get out of that?
It's a job, work through it. There's no divine inspiration, just speaking personally. Inspiration doesn't come out of the ether. It's something you sit down, you put in the work. A lot of it is mind numbing, but through that work, the gems reveal themselves and you can extrapolate them from all the BS. But you have to put in the work.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that that's as a full-time artist, that's definitely the super professional way to look at it and approach it. And the same thing, but just speaking about it in a more, I guess, for me, organic way, is just, if everything is a masterpiece, nothing is a masterpiece. If everything I do deserves all of your attention, then nothing I do is going to gather your attention or to gain your attention. So just freely being willing to make things that don't work, and that's not easy, but it's when you realize that you have so much permission to make so much bad work and so much stuff that nobody needs to ever see. Then you can edit through those things, like Osiris said, the gems will be in there and the ideas will kind of come out of that work. So whenever I get stuck or overwhelmed, I just try to allow myself to make something really bad.
I have a lot of thoughts on this. Same as Osiris said, I think there's a quote that inspiration doesn't find you, you have to be in the studio when it comes, so that's a big part of it. But on a practical side, because I know a lot of people deal with this, I think researching, trying new mediums, trying different techniques are always inspirational. And for me, a big part of it is working on multiple things at once, because whenever you get stuck in one area, you can go somewhere else. So for instance, if I work on a sculpture and I've had it, I can go print make or do something else. And then just sharing ideas with other creatives, I think community is a big part of it. So talking to other artists and not having this kind of scarcity mentality that, oh, I have this idea, if I tell this idea to somebody else, because I feel like it's a muscle, so the more ideas you have, the more ideas you have. So it's it just feeds, it's like you're just building momentum. And I have more ideas than I will ever be able to do, so I'm always happy to give other people those, go make it, whatever, and just not feel worried. And also, you have to make bad work and not be afraid, just make the wrong.
So how do you determine what's bad work?
Anybody want to start with that one?
Yes.
I'll take your idea.
Okay.
So the interesting thing to me about that question is that I find that very often my relationship with the work when I make it versus when I've had some time away from it changes drastically. So it's a lot of times there are things that I make in a moment and I'm not impressed. I'm like, cool, I'll move on to something else. And then a cleaning up my studio one day 6 months later, and I look at something, I'm like, oh wow, like this is a thing. So the fact of the matter is just like the work you do is subjective. I mean, like there's definitely skill, there's mastery involved in learning things, but it's like nothing's necessarily amazing. The most amazing thing I create is not going to be loved by everyone. So it's just about kind of allowing, it's an editing process, and I think finding for yourself what space gives you the best ability to edit. So for me, sometimes it's time, which is why I love working on personal work, because I have the time to just sit with it, whereas when I'm doing work for a client, I have to make something and like it and get it to them in a fairly quick amount of time, and that's a little bit more frustrating for me. But personal work is like I can sit on things and kind of decide later how much I like it, or sometimes I think something's great and then I'm bored with it after a couple of weeks. So the editing process is where's that?
Well, I'll also add there's a lot of duality in art, so it's like opposites are simultaneously true. So you can have something that you think is great, but there's like some people that are like, oh, this is good, I'm gonna stop. And then you can never really achieve great things because you're okay with the good and you find it so precious. So like non-attachment is supposed to be so it's like not feeling that the work is so precious that you can't push it. And like what Chad's saying, sometimes you'll make something and you'll think like, oh, this is crap, and put it away, and you come back and it's like, oh, it's good. And there's other things where like, this was good, and then you come back and you're like, that's actually boring, and I can push it further. So it's just always building on your not being afraid to destroy things or push them away, or and not being so hasty, be like immediately, this is terrible. Give it some space.
Yeah, for me personally, it's pretty simple. For my bad works, they're ones that I'm dispassionate about. I think it's important to be invested in your work and not be doing something begrudgingly. And it shows. People can see where you were when you created something and whether you were invested in it or not. So follow your passion and always stay true to that, because I think that's where what would be called bad work would come from.
Thank you. What was the significant difference between when you became a full-time artist and when you created part-time?
Compromise. To be a full-time artist, to be an artist in general, you have to have some element of ego. To be a professional artist, you have to have that ego, but you have to know when to set it aside, because, especially as a public artist, you're collaborating with the communities that you are creating for, whether directly or indirectly.
Are you there?
And I just lost my train of thought.
It's all right.
I haven't slept much.
I want some notes I want to forget about that. I think one is belief in myself. There's a certain level, I think with any creative, you're compelled to do this thing. That's you. You're gonna do it. It's gonna happen. So do it, share it. Second guessing whether what you needed to do needs to be given to the world, I think that does us a disservice and slows us down. It doesn't have, there's never gonna be a point where everybody loves what you do, so it's just like, just start now with the thing that you feel compelled to do and that you really need to put out, well, even if it's not put out to the world necessarily when you create it, just this thing that you feel needs to exist that didn't exist before, do it. Now you have something that didn't exist before and you can choose what to do with it. I think the belief in the fact that like I can create things that were worth sharing, it took me a long time to kind of get there. Another is an increased understanding of what's possible. I think the one thing that's kind of unique to artists is that no my experience has been like no artist can tell you the successful route to being an artist. Like if I meet Osiris and I want to do the same thing that he's doing, he can tell me what he's doing, it won't work. My path is gonna inherently be different. And so when you realize that and you start to look at not just what are the possibilities that are put in front of you, but what opportunities can you create, that becomes a very interesting space to operate in. And I think a really important one if you want to make it sustainable. And I think the other one is audience. Like audience is the thing that's taken me the longest time to build up. The other two can be kind of more immediate, but you know, I've been an artist. My creative practice has been going for about 14 years, and so wherever I am now, whatever people perceive that to be, is like that's taken that much time to build up. So I think if you want to be a full-time artist, just share your work with people. You don't even have to like it, but people have to know that you're doing it. And there will be, and one thing I think is allowing your work to grow in front of people's eyes. Like, I love the idea of someone saying, yeah, I saw your work 3 years ago, I didn't like it that much. But this, what you're doing now, has really grown, like this is amazing. It's like if I didn't show it 3 years ago, you wouldn't be exposed to me, and you wouldn't have seen that I'm committed to growing.
For me, I think the biggest change was that there's no time limit. So every waking hour is about art. Every friend I have is somehow related to the arts. It's just like I'm thinking about it 24/7. And before I made that leap, it was like, you know, you could put it away, put it aside, or seriously, and now it's just everything is about making art. And then just keep building on that practice. And I'm being more intentional about what I'm doing. And it is not for the faint of heart to be a full-time artist, I think, because there's no, like Todd saying, what works for one person may not work for you, and there's no roadmap, and everyone's got an opinion of what worked for them and telling you, like, oh, you should do this or you should do this, and that might not be the right path for you. So that's been the biggest thing, is about being intentional and being like really clear on what my goals are, what my market is, like who I am as an artist, because like I'm not the artist Chavez. Like we have a totally different audience. You know, what work can achieve. I tried murals, and I was like, after 3 months of tendonitis, I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So, and I'm like, I could make money doing that, but it's not who I am, and it's like it's not where my art is. So I think it's like being really clear on what being an artist looks like for you, and then committing to that.
The commitment's the big thing. You really have to, the difference between a hobby and a job is that commitment and the recognition that it is a job. There, you're gonna have to do a lot of things that you don't wanna do. You have to work long hours. You're gonna have to take risks that might not always pan out. And risk-taking is a big thing. A good line, a colleague of mine, Matt Moore, was on a podcast recently, and his line was, you have to be very comfortable with being uncomfortable. And nothing could be truer than this, because you'll never achieve great things or break out of the hobby sector without taking those big leaps and risks. Now it's calculated risk, I hope, but it's still risk. And a lot of times you aren't going to have the support of everyone around you. You're lucky if you do. More often than not, you're flying solo because you're trying to achieve something that the world hasn't seen, to show them what's possible. So yeah, commitment.
Could you guys offer up any pro tips for anyone in the audience?
Understand your market. If, say, murals are really popular right now, public art's really popular right now. If that market's awash, is that really what you want to be getting into? But you should be getting into what you're passionate about first and foremost. Passion, and then, yes, know your market. If there's something missing that you think should be out there that people would want and desire, fill that gap. Fill that gap. And yeah.
Along that lines, I would say, along that lines, like one of the things I would say is understanding that it's not about the money, but the money is super important. So for instance, I've had opportunities to do murals, and it's something that I want to do a lot more of because my art experience is more enjoyable. So the beauty of murals is that you can design a mural that can be small, it can be digital, and you don't have to create the mural until someone pays you, until someone wants it. So I can design murals all day on my iPad, and if nothing ever happens with it, nothing ever happens with it. But if somebody wants it, then I can say, pay me, I will create this piece of art. That's much less frustrating for my creative practice than making something and hoping someone buys it or hoping someone sees value in it. The personal work, that work is still a huge part of my process, but I really want to move into a space where people are commissioning things, which I'm finding in murals and workshops. So understanding that your art practice needs to be sustained. Also, there is value in your work. A lot of times, just like teachers are undervalued, everybody recognizes that a teacher does amazing work and that the work that teachers do is incredibly important to our culture, but people don't pay teachers well. Artists are the same way. We're creating value, we create things that don't exist. If you were here for the last panel, you heard about like artists do things that are meaningful, often on a minimal budget or for free. There's value in that. So when you appreciate your value of that, charge people for it so that you can keep doing it. You're creating values, keep doing it. And then the other one I would say is like, don't look for the normal. I think the 9-to-5 path is beautiful and sometimes necessary. For a long time, my creative career was sustained with a 9-to-5 job. But the difference between the 9-to-5 job and being an artist is that the 9-to-5 is kind of, there's a structure that's already built for you to engage that structure and make a consistent income for yourself and make more money for somebody else. When you are a full-time artist, you're creating the structure, you're creating the value, and you have to, there's no roadmap for it. So you have to be comfortable creating a roadmap. But that's such a magical experience that it's really worth it as you get closer and closer to success.
So I agree with Cyrus about the
You can turn your mic up.
with the passion.
It's not on.
Hello.
There we go.
I agree with Cyrus about the passion. Like, if you don't have the passion, it's just never going to work. Or if you think you're going to be a full-time artist and automatically people are going to start lining up to buy your art, that's also. Or even I've met some artists like that. Like, oh, people love my work. I didn't think it was going to be hard, and yeah, it's really hard. And then once again, deciding what kind of artist you're going to be, because I am probably the complete opposite of Chad. I don't want to do murals. I cannot commission work. I want to make stuff and have people see the value in it. So I realized early on, like, somebody told me, well, you should make stickers, you should do that. And I was like, that wasn't true to my art. I do a lot of art dealing with women's issues. It's political, makes people uncomfortable. So I can't like pull up in an art fair and have my work out because it's not going to be that audience. So knowing who your audience is and being honest, and that was actually for a long time a big thing with me because I come from more of an academic background. I came from New York. I worked at New York Art Gallery, so I knew my path was a little different. And then for a while, it made me feel kind of like, oh, am I being pretentious or whatever? Like, I want to be in the galleries, like my dreams would be being in the Guggenheim or the MoMA, and then being okay with that. So with some of my friends, their work's more commercial. They can be in a gallery where people just enjoy that the work's beautiful. It has more mass appeal, and I question myself a lot about. And like, should I just do that? You know, my husband's been very supportive because a lot of times he'll be like, you should do that because it's pretty. People will like it. And just knowing, I know it's very Midwest, but just being okay with like being authentic and knowing that the more personal that your work becomes and true to yourself, the more people are going to like it and it's going to resonate with people. So the more I lean into myself and what I think my work was going to be, I find more people are receptive to it. And then when I'm trying to like make work that people are going to find pretty or pleasing or want to put over the couch or whatever, people have put my work over the couch. But just knowing that. So there's so many ways being an artist can look now. I mean, there's digital ways, you can have merchandise, there's Instagram, you can do, have your own store. So just knowing that there's a lot of options and there's a place for your work. I think that's the biggest thing, just figuring out what that is.
And one thing that Doris reminded me of is like grants and residencies. Like a lot of times there's resources available to artists specifically through grants and residencies so that you're not looking for clients, but there are people who are very interested in supporting your work. That's a great thing to take advantage of.
And I would like to know, I do not, we are absolute polar opposites. This is a perfect panel. I paint saccharinely sweet images that are universally beautiful, and I know that I'm doing it that way. I would say this day and age, access to everything has been so democratized via the internet and social media. Learn to leverage that, because I do not envy gallery artists at all. Just like what you're talking about, the beauty of painting murals is I'm gonna get a deposit before I even start designing anything. The caveat to that is I had to do a lot of free work that I didn't get paid for, like the festival circuit, or painting for just because it's a great location. There is a such thing as exposure bucks and leveraging that, but it has to be real exposure bucks. But leverage the power of social media for your work to let people know about it. You don't need a gallery to be representing you anymore. I think that galleries, it's an unpopular opinion, but I think they're on the way out. It's a bad business model, and I think no matter what, artists should get paid upfront to create what they're creating. And yes, and also I want you to recognize your value. Yeah, that's a very important part, and say no. And I know it's hard for a lot of us to do because we have what I call empty fridge syndrome. You're broke for so long, and you'll do anything because you're so scared that you aren't going to have any food in the fridge. But once you recognize your value, you know when to say no, and you know when to ask for more. That's a very, very important aspect.
Yeah, I'll tag on to that. I think saying no is a big thing because it's easy to do things because, well, that's going to make me some money. But sometimes that can be a detour that's keeping you from your main goal. Yes. So it's easy to get really swayed on these other things, and that detour might be 6 months, a year, where you haven't been building your main practice. So it's like just having that faith in yourself and that art that you're making and finding that right path.
I put colorful triangles in my work, and my clients won't let me stop doing it. I did not mean to go down that path. And every time I try to branch out, but that's the beauty of also doing the free and risky work, is that you get to explore the themes and concepts that you might not get commissioned for, but it's a way to showcase what's possible so that clients will desire that in the future.
And just for since both of these people mentioned it, and I also feel very strongly about no. A caveat is when you're starting out and you kind of don't know what the options are, yes, it's good for kind of exploring the options, but once you know what you want, once you know what you're looking for, that's when it's time to start saying no. Currently in my career, I am in a position where I love saying no. It feels so sexy, it feels so good. And my goal is to get to the point where saying no is just like, it's a thing of like, okay, if the budget for this project is $1,000. I make $3,000 in a day, so saying yes to this doesn't make sense. I'm not there, but I am in a space where a lot of times people are proposing things to me that it's just like, I don't want to do this. The budget that you have, I know that you're going to end up making this a lot more work than you're paying me to do. I'm not passionate about it, so I'm not going to do a good job with it. So, no, and I can use the time that I've saved myself to figure out where the other opportunities for money may be. That's kind of where I am now. And it feels good to be able to have a measure of control over my time, but there's definitely a sacrifice and compromise with that because it's not always glamorous, but I really love that I spend my days doing the things that I'm wanting to, knowing that they're going to lead me where I want to go.
I have one more. I think key tip to being a professional artist is find your community. You can probably make absolutely great work and make a living in your room by yourself in the studio, but I think you can achieve so much more when you find your people. And they don't have to necessarily like be doing the same thing that you're doing, but that helps. So if you can find some other artists that are kind of in the same track as you and help each other along. So I'm very fortunate being at the McCall Center that we have artists coming from all over the world that are further along in their game than I am. So I can learn from them what they did, where they've been, make connections, because without connections and reputation and credibility, I don't think there's any way you can really make it as a professional artist.
I'll piggyback on that really quick. There's not a single commission I've received that wasn't through some personal connection that I've made, whether it be 3 degrees of separation or directly. It's been about creating those relationships with those around you and making other people passionate about what you're doing.
And a repeat of that, I'd say in 14 years, I can count on one hand the amount of like huge opportunities that I've applied for, that I've gotten. Almost anything that if anybody's familiar with things that I've done, 98% of it was somebody was like, hey, such and such recommended you, or I've been looking at your work for a while and I think this would be a good project. So things, the community leads you to where you need to go.
So when we're talking about art as a career and being professionals, we get to that place as creatives, we do a lot of stuff for free, right? So how is it, or at what point as a creative did you say, this is business and I've got to get paid? And all of the things that come with running a business, like as a creative, like there's all these business things that we have to do that kind of like they were talking about in the last panel that takes us away from being creative, so how has that process been for you all?
For me, I have to isolate the two. I know that there's a certain amount of boring computer paperwork that I've got to do, and then the creative stuff comes later. For me, that transitional switch was forced on me. I used to be a scenic artist for the film and television industry, and when Pat McCrory, our wonderful ex-governor, killed our incentives, I lost my job. And I had a choice. I could move to Atlanta, or I could take that jump and give this a shot. And I started off doing signage. I was painting, signs for tattoo shops. But then when the opportunities came, I leveraged them as fast as possible. But I always understood that if I wanted to survive, you've got to do anything and everything to make it work. Get creative with it.
For 9 years, I sustained my creative practice, working a 9 to 5 at an art supply store. Eventually coming to the point of managing the store. That was the most beautiful thing for my practice because my bills were paid by my job, which allowed me to make the work that I wanted to make. And what happens when you're able to make the work that you want to make is that the work that people see from you is the work you wanted to do. So if they like that, once people start buying your work, that's what they're buying. So I definitely am not against people sustaining their creative practice with a 9 to 5. If that's necessary, then please do it. It's more beneficial for your art. But the last 2 years of working that job, I tried to start to shift my schedule to be able to give me more time for my creative practice. So I think I went to a 4 days on, 3 days off model with that job. When that job ended, the next year, I took on the position working for an artist as an assistant, and that was a 3 days on, 4 days off model, which at that point I started calling myself a full-time artist because I spent more time making art than I did working for someone else. And then that job ended at the very end of 2019, and I was like, I'm gonna pursue this full-time. And So 2020, I was like, I'm not working for anyone else. I'm not gonna be employed by anyone else. I'm gonna give this a shot, see how this goes. 3 months later, COVID hit. So that was really interesting in that when I finished that previous job, I didn't apply for unemployment at all. When COVID hit and I realized like everything that I was thinking I would be able to do was basically gonna get shut down, I applied for unemployment and I got stimulus unemployment, which was amazing. And it also gave me a taste of like what like a nice size check coming on a regular basis can look like. And that was, I guess, when I realized, like, yeah, I have to figure out how to make this sustainable because, like, that was putting me specifically in a place that I wanted to be. And I'm still very much working on trying to make it like that kind of consistent money coming in sustainably. But at this point, I'm able to sustain myself through creative projects, and then when in between things, like usually I'll kind of take on something. Like I know people who own businesses. And so I'll be like, hey, like I got some dead time, do you need any help? And I know a couple of people who usually need some help when it kind of lines up. And that kind of supplements things when it's a little bit of a dry spot. And then usually something else kind of comes around and then I can keep going. I'm very much trying to learn to structure my business because that's very important for making it sustainable.
So I'm still working on myself. I'm looking at it kind of too as like, I probably would say I've only been full time for about a year and a half, probably when I got my studio in McCall. And it's kind of what I realized is I'm really good at making a lot of work. I'm not really good at letting people buy it. So that's something I'm trying to work on is like, I'm constantly making new stuff and I think we're supposed to keep like showing people work so they keep seeing it and buying it. But, and I'm back and forth on making a store, but I realized that was something that I was like, I have to work on, like actually letting people buy my work, because when they come to my studio and they get excited, they buy it, which is usually like right in time for like when all my bills hit from my studio and stuff, which works out. But yeah, basically it's just figuring out, like, I think I'm still working through that part where Osiris is talking about like having an admin day, setting up, pricing your work, reaching out to collectors, building that collector base, which is more what my market is, because it's out there, but it's just that whole process of juggling everything simultaneously and not letting the work suffer.
This might not be the right track, but something that's important top of my head is get used to talking about your work, explaining your work. Even if your work is very literal and obvious, you need to be able to articulate what you and your work is about without anybody ever seeing your work. You have to be your own salesperson, and then eventually other people will be your salesman.
Thank you for saying that, because I say in the last like 6 months to a year, I've really seen the importance of that. I don't really know how to do it, but I have seen that it's like, yeah, like
We're all learning, huh?
People want that elevator pitch, and to be able to speak to what you do without showing somebody something, at least long enough to hold their attention or to make them when they get home they're thinking about it, they want to check it out. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a big part for me was having a space outside my house. So we have a lot of open studios that we call, and we have people coming through, and there's like collector events where they come through. So being able to, like, in the beginning, my work is very personal. Like I deal with issues like abuse and things like that, women's issues, misogyny. So in the beginning, I was very nervous about talking to people about my work, but as every time a new group of people came in and when they responded, I got more confident about my pitch. So it's much easier to relate to people, and that just being part of being available for people to see your work. I mean, I think as artists, we're kind of like animals at a zoo, where the majority of people don't understand what we do or how we do it, or understand the work that's involved. So when people come into your studio and kind of see behind the curtain, I think that's really valuable for both the artists and the viewers in creating that connection with people so that they'll actually support you.
One more thing that is very important, it might seem small, but it is the most important thing you can do. The number of artists I know, and I'm baffled that they're even in business, that do not respond to emails, do not even have a voicemail set up, basic things. I make a point that if I receive an email, any inquiry, I respond to that email by the end of the day or the next day at the latest. Being punctual has landed me more commissions than anything else. And I've taken jobs from good friends of mine because I was there and available to the client.
There's an artist, Kent Youngstrom, that I do work for from time to time, and that's his thing too. He says, like, be easy to work with. He's like, that'll get you more work than anything. Like, especially working with artists, when people know, like, yeah, he's gonna be deadlines, he's gonna respond in a timely manner, he's gonna exceed my expectations when the job is done. And those aren't necessarily always easy things to do, but I do understand that, like, it truly is important, it truly does get you more work.
Yeah, I would build on that too. Your credibility is worth more than anything. If people think you're dirt to work with, no matter how good your art is, you're not gonna get anywhere. And being flexible, so like when I'm at the call center, sometimes they need an art handler, and I would be happy to do that to pay my bills, or work with them and teach. So like, that's what I fall back on, is teaching, especially kids and teens and stuff. But just knowing what my reputation is, like the opportunities that it lands you, and building those connections with people, is pretty much the big thing.
Awesome. We have about 15 minutes left. We want to take some questions from the audience.
Yes, sir.
I got.
Do you want to wait, or can I just talk loud?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
I come from the tech world, and so one of the things I continue to hear all of you say in different ways is the difficulty with balancing your marketing and your representation to potential buyers, whether they be, local community or they be collectors and sellers. Perhaps you could speak a little bit to anything. I mean, you mentioned Hollywood, and the agent came to mind, right? I mean, is it so far out of the realm of possibility? I've never heard of a thing like that. In the tech world, we have recruiters, and we go to the recruiter, and they do the groundwork for us, and they represent us better than ourselves. Almost our tires right sometimes. So in the art world, that intermediate representation, I wonder if that would free you to be more creative.
From my work as a public artist, as a muralist, we do, often there are project managers that are the middlemen between me and the client. And it's one of the most valuable things, especially for large jobs. And especially when you have to work with committees or boards that are making these decisions, it's much easier to have a single point of contact. It's valuable. They get 20% of every job though, so, but it frees you up to not deal directly with the client, because I tell everyone this, but painting the mural is the easiest part. Everything leading up to creating that, negotiation with the client, making sure that I feel I'm represented, making sure that they're happy, it's a lot of work. And there's a lot of back and forth, there's a lot of compromise, as I mentioned. Yeah, the intermediary is there, it's helpful, but I think that regardless, it's important that as an artist you know how to market yourself and don't rely on somebody else to fill that gap for you, because I've had some inconsistent project managers or reps. You can always trust yourself. You might not always be able to trust somebody else.
I've never been represented by an intermediary agent, like a third party. The way that I try to balance things is I try to chase enthusiasm, meaning I try to really put myself, I try to engage people who are enthusiastic about what I'm doing. If people are kind of like, oh, I want to hire an artist, I don't really get that a lot of energy, because it's like, the stuff that I do is not typical. So it's like, what I'm going to do is not what you were expecting. So it's like, I like when people are like, I like your work. That's when I'm like, okay, now I need to put energy into this, and that's kind of how that's how I balance.
It's kind of a pseudo collector.
Yeah. So it's like, and even if it's, yes, absolutely. And even if it's like a corporate, entity or something like that, but still just like, we've seen your work, we like what you do, we would like to work with you. Because it's usually just a lot less convincing someone. It's like, okay, cool, you like what I do, then it shouldn't be very difficult for me to like throw out a few ideas, you pick one you like the most, and we can get the thing moving. When I'm trying to get people to like me, it's a lot of wasted energy. So, sexy no.
So when I came out of college, I worked in some fancy New York art galleries and stuff. So unfortunately, I know what that can be like when you have a gallery that really supports you and does everything for you. So I think that's kind of like ultimately my goal. But the world's different now. Now that like that more avenues are available, it's in a good way. It's not that anymore where you do your work, get a gallery, get shows. That's how it is all the time. So I think one of the challenges for artists today is that there are so many options and figuring out what to do and finding the right partnerships. I'm still working on it. Thank you for the patience.
Any other questions?
So in terms of marketing yourselves, how much of yourself and your beliefs and your ideas are you willing to expose online to promote yourself? And I'll say this in a more specific term. With ASC being stripped of its ability to process the grants that it was kind of sort of given the ability to do, how much are you willing to put yourselves out in terms of fighting for one cause or another? And how much are you willing to lose in terms of business and working with certain organizations to do so?
That is a very good question. I personally have never taken public funding for anything, not because I didn't want to. I just prefer to hustle. Things move faster than waiting on a committee to decide whether you're valuable or not. I know my value, create that. To that extent, what you're willing to put on your sleeve, your reputation is everything, as we discussed. Whether you like it or not, art and what you create is a commodity. People aren't just buying your work, they're buying you. So you are a brand, whether you like it or not, and everything that you are is associated with that package. And some people might like it, some people might not. I think it is absolutely detrimental that when you get to a point in your career when you can speak up against BS, you do it loud. And if people don't like it, the benefit is that you got to a point in your career where you don't need people like that. But it's your obligation to speak up for those who don't have the opportunities that you do, and to call out injustice or whatever it might be immediately when you see it.
I am also gonna, I felt like it was kind of a two-part question. Osiris answered both parts. I think it's specifically in relation to the issues with the ASC and the city taking away the operational support, specifically without giving a plan of how they're going to support the artist that may lose out if that's not provided. I am unusually vocal about that issue. The last couple of days, my social media has been dedicated to saying very specifically what my viewpoint is. I think the beauty for me of the way I make my creative choices is that, for instance, I have received money this year from ASC, which I think is the first time I've gotten, but this is the first time I've gotten a personal grant from ASC. But also recognizing that I can't afford to support people who aren't supporting my longevity. And sometimes and I'm willing to I feel confident that if I have to make sacrifices in working with certain people, organizations, etc., that the stance that I take is going to benefit me by putting me in alignment with people who appreciate the decisions that I'm making. But I do think that's a little bit separate than the other thing of like how personal do I get in my work. And I want to get more personal in my work, not necessarily about politics and stuff, but just about the things that really, there are a lot of things that are part of my story, a part of my life that I don't talk about because I'm not comfortable sharing those things, but I want to get more comfortable sharing those things because as you mentioned, Doris, like I truly believe that the more specific you get in your work, the more universal it becomes. And that sounds so counterintuitive, but it's like I'm just saying it, like the people who really have the most impact are the people who make the most unexpected decision and kind of do the most people who do the thing that only they would do become the people that everybody like really gravitates towards their work.
On that note, really quickly, what we do as artists is purely to be vulnerable. It doesn't work if you aren't vulnerable. So wearing your heart on your sleeve and involving that in your work, it's an absolute necessity. Because if you aren't vulnerable, people can't resonate with what you're doing.
So I pretty much lay it all on the table, and I think that was a decision I made early on as an artist, that I wasn't going to make work that had mass appeal, and I was going to address difficult things because that's just who I am. So it's like, I was basically excluded from a lot of opportunities right off the bat from what my work is, and I just had to accept that, but I'm playing the long game. So, like for instance, I kind of shot myself in the foot during COVID, and I moved to Mooresville, so now I'm not in Mecklenburg County. And the way you get grants there is you have to go meet some guy and pitch before you can like apply to anything. Like, yeah, my work's not gonna fly. Like I was just like, I'm not getting any grants, and then trying to get back here. Whereas like I have gotten grants from the ASC, which is absolutely amazing because it was really validating to know that even though my work it's not, like something like a landscape where that like anybody can appreciate it, that there was a place for me. And I really appreciated that. So I've just been holding on to like doing from the whole time and just hoping that at some point, like my hero is Louise Bourgeois, and like she finally got recognition at age 80, so I'm like, if I have to wait that long, that's what I'm gonna do, and then just make it work until it's.
And just since you mentioned that issue, and I just want to say something to hopefully give a slight education for everyone here, because they may hear about it. The Arts and Science Council, when money is donated through taxpayer dollars, through corporate sponsorships, through wealthy philanthropists, when they decide to give money towards the arts, they usually give the money to an organization that is not an art institution. So for instance, if Bank of America decides to give a large sum of money, Bank of America is not an art institution. They don't know who the artists are who needs to get it. So they may donate it to the city, they may donate it to another nonprofit. The nonprofits then usually decide who that money goes to. Most of the time that goes to another nonprofit. So maybe, for instance, like a museum, which is great. Because museums need money and they deserve money. Or maybe a performing arts center, that's great. They deserve and need money. But when you give it to those larger institutions, they usually use it to build out their programming. Individual local artists do not get those funds. With the Arts and Science Council, it is the only organization with the scale and the expertise to really get large sums of money to the community at large. So they're the only organization in Charlotte that has the ability to help artists fund a lot of the programs and the ideas that they're doing. So a lot of things that we're seeing in the last 4 to 5 years that have been really engaging, like the Charlotte International Arts and like different, sometimes things that are in partnership with larger institutions, sometimes things are totally independent. Those things are being funded by those artists through monies, through their own money and through money that's been donated from other spaces, a lot of times to Arts and Science Council. So for the city to remove the operation budget, that's a decision, that's fine. But if the city's committed to equitable, if the city's committed to equitable giving in the arts, meaning like helping artists create programs that they may be able to do, they're able to do things for free. People can engage in those programs for free because the artist got paid. If you're committed to those types of things happening, then what's your plan for replacing what might fail without your operational budget? So that's kind of specifically what that issue is people need to understand like what's happening with the arts. It's like, it's not a matter of like, is it good or bad to take money away from the Arts and Science Council? But it's like, if this is the only organization that can do this equitable giving, that can make sure that money is truly getting into the whole community, and you're gonna risk that operation not being able to happen, then what is your plan for making that available a different way?
So a number of times y'all have talked about knowing your worth and knowing your value. So there's definitely that involved with pricing your work, but also the other part of pricing your work is what someone willing to pay for it. So my question would be, how do you determine price points for your work, and do you work in different price points, and do you base it solely on scale, based with your medium, that the cost of materials, along with your time, or how do you do that?
Because I work with so many developers and corporations, people that understand numbers better than they do what I do. I personally price my work by the square foot, but that does range. The larger the project, the lower the cost per square foot. As I end up doing far less detail and fills. And the smaller the piece, the higher the cost per square foot. There's also the brand charge. The further I divulge away from what I purely want to do as an artist, the higher that price goes up, because I don't want to paint your logo into a mural, but I will, and you'll pay for it. And building out like that has really helped me. But yeah, mine's on a sliding scale. If it's a job that I'm absolutely passionate about, I'll do it for the cost of materials. Because opportunities like that are far and few between, and you take them when you can. Also, the obligation of collectors or commissioning parties that they might not know about. You can charge a lot more to, say, a multinational corporation, obviously, than you would to a mom and pop down the street. Those larger entities, they might pay more, but they're also footing the bill for you to engage the community in those free projects. So ultimately, no matter what that sliding scale goes, it all pans out to be the same thing.
It's really good. Yeah, pricing is definitely the hardest part, especially as a fine artist, where it's not something like you're like, okay, like, Chad makes t-shirts. You can look at other people's t-shirts and pretty much guess a fair price on that. But one artist said to me, which I'll never forget, if you undersell yourself, you're hurting every other artist. Yes. So if I am too cheap and I don't value my work, that person who saw my prices is going to go somewhere else and say, well, Doris is going to do that for $20. Why should I pay you? So I think like looking at kind of where you are, yes, where you are in your career, you have to start lower, obviously, than someone who's more established, but still having a fair value on your work, so that you're not underselling yourself. And then I actually had an art consultant come to my studio and double my prices, because she was like, your work is going to appeal to people who have a higher price range. It's kind of like your friends should be able to afford your work. So it's like, if I price my work too low, the people who can afford the work will not see the value in it. So it's really counterintuitive. So like, you know, something I was charging $200 for, now I'm charging $600 or $700 for, and then like when I have a collector come in and buy a whole bunch of work, like she just went to Target, I'm like, oh damn, like, people have money. I might not have money, and I can't afford my work or my friend's work, but there are people out there who have money, and like, it's kind of like make-believe in our world for money. Like, it exists, people buy like fancy handbags, like with a blink of an eye, like why should they value your heart? You know, so, I mean, I think that was the biggest thing I learned over this past year, that like, I have to put value on it, and people will believe me that it's that valuable.
Yeah, I think there's so many different things that go into it. Some of the principles that go into, to me, like knowing your value, is one, it takes me a lot of work to get to the point where I can do this masterfully. So my practice has to sustain all the work that it takes to get to that point. So it's like when a person pays, they're not just paying for one thing, they're paying for a lot of the things that help me get to that point, or me be able to sustain my business. Another thing, as was mentioned, is like understanding the market value. And there's so many different markets, so it's like that's kind of you have to do your own research with that, but it's like understanding who tends to buy your work, and then learning like how that, you know, like learning how to cater to that market. I just had a conversation yesterday or 2 days ago about an opportunity, and somebody's like, are you gonna sell prints? And I was like, I love to sell prints, because I would love to have something at that price point, but like my prints don't generally sell. So it's not really worth the work to me to like make prints available if I can just make an original, and then I can charge people for the fact that they own this piece. They are the only person on the planet that owns this piece of work. And then, but if people bought more prints from me, I would make more prints. You know, so it's like understanding the market. And then I forgot a thought. It's gonna pop back into my head. I'm gonna raise my hand again when it comes back. But there's like one more. Oh, I know there is. You can always add value if you overcharge someone. You can't get money back if you undercharge someone. So it's like if I charged you $3,000 for a handbag and you don't think it was worth it, I can throw something else in. You know what I mean? Like I can add to that experience. I can have someone deliver it to your door. Like there's just a million and a half things that you can do to add value, but it's like, so you can always go up, but you can't go down. And also in regards to that, unfortunately, I mean, I don't like saying it like this, but I found it to be true. It's like the person that can spend $600 on a piece can spend $800. The person who can spend $35 can't necessarily spend $75. So playing in this pool when I'm trying to sustain a business is a very dangerous thing to do. Going into a space where I can increase my value is a much safer space for me to play and try to sustain a business.
Yeah, I agree with that. A note? Okay. Yeah, and then you addressing the other part of your question, I think it is really important to have multiple price points. So maybe like for now I'm doing printmaking, so I can make a lino cut that is one color, $25, and then I can build up depending on what type of work it is. So having something for those people so that they can collect something, and I know a lot of artists do this, something small. So at least like someone who's passionate about your work can own a piece of your work. So that multiple price points can make you feel better about that, like, you know, everybody can afford you, but like everybody shouldn't be able to afford a big painting that you make. You know, that's more like what Chad's saying. It's true. It's like we'll spend $900, we'll spend $1,500. So it's like, are you, what is it Julio says, are you making art for the masses or the classes? You know, so it's just like what you feel good about, and it's a lot of throwing spaghetti at the wall, actually.
And a big part of this is educating your collectors, basically like this, of what has brought about that value. On my end of the spectrum for doing more public work, I'm more like a contractor. I don't even think of myself as an artist, I think of myself as a craft person. So I approach things that way, and one of my favorite tenets of commissions and business in general, or any project, is the famous triangle. You can have it fast, cheap, or quality.
Good. Yep.
You can have, so pick two. You can't have all three, you gotta pick two. And that's one of the most brilliant ways to educate value to potential clients.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question.
Hi. Doing the transition between part-time and full-time, how do you manage the stress and take care of your mental health?
Thank you.
Have you met us? I have a breakdown every week. For me personally, it's separating myself from the job. I love being out in nature. I love taking hikes. I recently picked up fly fishing. No good at it. But hiking down to Lindo Gorge and staring at the water and all these fish that won't touch my bait is one of the most relaxing and resetting things you could ever do. You've got to separate yourself at some point from being 100% in your work because you won't thrive if you aren't rested and mentally present.
I'm gonna use that same language because I like how broad it is. I think that it's important to separate yourself from the work and the process. I think the more healthy ways you can do that, the better. But sometimes you mix it up. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, like you always want your practice to be sustainable, so you want to be taking care of yourself as well as your energy. I would say the biggest thing for me is I tend to be in a state of overwhelm, and like more than any other emotional state, like that's the one that kind of plays me as an artist. It's just like the awareness of the fact that like I have an audience who pays attention to things that I do, that I'm trying to engage an audience, and the fact that I have ideas that are things I've never done before, and that, you know, like where I want to go is just such a, where I want to go and truly believe I'm capable of going is so far beyond the point where I currently am. Like when I get in my head in that space, it can be a lot, but just one thing that's really cool about VAPA is just like being able to be in a space of the community. So it's like I can like leave my studio and just like walk down the hall and hang out with people. But yeah, separating from the process is good for, because it's not balanced. It's 24, you're always thinking about your art. All my friends are artists, all my enemies are artists. It's consuming, so whatever ways you can find to separate and sustain yourself are great.
Push.
Hello.
There we go.
Once again, opposite of Osiris. I don't want to do anything but do art. So if I'm stressed, I'm making art. And I think part of that is having had a lot of detours. I've had a lot of different jobs. I raised kids. My younger son has autism. I had to put this on hold for so long that making art is a privilege, and it's all I want to do. So the only way, like me recharging, is talking to other artists about the practice and sharing my passion. And that's it. So I'm literally 24/7, even when I'm doing yoga, I'm thinking about art. So there's absolutely no separation. Like this is what I want to do. So that's pretty much all it is for me.
So John, we'd love you noticed this. Being able to talk to other industry professionals, colleagues, we might not be in the exact same wheelhouse, but we all struggle with this similar, if not the same, hurdles and difficulties within our profession, and being able to have a sounding board that is empathetic but also can be constructive is one of the most valuable things. And like Chad mentioned, that's one of the beautiful things about the VAPA Center is that we're such a diverse group of people. There's at least one person for every problem you got that might have a solution.
And there was a thing I wanted to say that goes back to the question you asked about knowing your worth. And this applies to pretty much anything. I feel very strongly about this. People need to have skin in the game. It's not about money. It's about investing in things that you appreciate. If people don't invest in things, they don't appreciate them. So for me, it's like when there's something, if I know somebody can't afford something, there's ways for me to make that available to them. But I need an investment of some sort. Like, show me that you appreciate it in some way, and let's begin a conversation. Like, because I can't afford my work. So I understand that part, but it's like, invest in people. You know, like if you can't make work that's affordable, it's like, work can be made if people truly show that they're invested in it, they have skin in the game. But I think that principle applies to just anything, relationships, people, like anything. Like if you appreciate something, invest something into it.
Thank you all for joining us on our Artist Talk. Let's give it a round of applause. Artists, thank you guys.
Yeah, you're so